Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the podcast. It's just me today. It's just me. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I'm getting into it, and I'm starting to, I kind of like the podcast sometimes when people do them alone. So I'm going to do that. I have been so lucky to have some of the greatest guests. I will tell you that. And I don't like to talk when the guests are on because I've had such good guests. I just want to hear what they have to say. And I'm not sure how my interview skills are yet. I'm just working on this. Folks, you can send me emails about anything. I'd love to hear your opinion if you like what I'm doing, or you want something else, or you just let me know. I'm picking up my pen as we speak. Yeah, love to hear from you. paranormalkaren@gmail.com. And what I've been doing is, I hope you like the comedy episode too. So there's always a little bit of comedy in there too. I think that the key is consistency, and I have none of that. Sometimes it's me and a comedian. Sometimes it's a ghost story. Sometimes it's an awesome, smart guest. But consistency probably never going to be the key to my success. So, but I do like this idea of taking on certain topics and just researching them myself. And that's Courage making noise. Courage sneezing. We'll get to Courage in a second. Just really doing some research. Basically what I'm saying here is I'm going to have to read some things, which anyone that knows me knows I hate reading. I'm a little dyslexic. It drains me, but I'm so into this and so into the paranormal. Why not do the research and put it all together as one? The boss, Courage, is here staring at me because he wants more chicken. Boss's health has been up and down. Right now we're good, so I'm not going to worry. A couple of days of waking me up all night because he had to run out. But I think we're good, right, boss? All right. He's going through my money. I know what it's like having a child. He's just going through more money. That's in the middle of the night. Then we're okay. Then a vet next day. Then we're okay. So anyways, let's get back to what's going on. So, so please send me negatives or positives. They all help out, okay? So I'm going to try and do this. And today's topic, the reason I picked today's topic is I just went on a ghost hunt in San Diego. Or an investigation, I guess would be. Some people don't like ghost hunt. They think hunting is bad. You have to eat what you hunt or something like that. But I was on the Star of India, which is a ship in San Diego. And you have to, if you are in San Diego, you have to go to this. Couple of things about it. The people that we rented it from, you can rent it at night. We were there 10:30 to 1 in the morning. There's a security guard that lets you in, and they could not have been nicer. And this place is fascinating. Some of you may be watching The Terror on AMC, which I think it's great. I'm watching it, and it's so good I can't turn it off. At the end of every episode, I'm completely depressed, which is ridiculous because in the beginning, the first thing they said was these were two ships that disappeared, and nobody ever saw them again. So it's not like a surprise as things start to go south on their journey in the Arctic or wherever their ships got stuck. There's two ships. One of them was named the Terror. That seems like an omen right there. Don't name your ship Terror. And also, if you haven't seen it and you like horror movies or scary stuff, I have to say, I think it was the first episode, there's an episode where a guy goes underwater, and I think that was one of the most visually, it was just really creepy and scary. And part of me is sad the show didn't go that way, and then the other part of me that wants to sleep at night is glad they did not. So I'm kind of on a ship theme. So I'm going to tell you about my time at the Star of India, and then I started researching haunted ships and ghost ships and superstitions, and man, there is some fascinating stuff. But a lot of you know the Star of India. That's the place that I told you about. I always tell you about where Wayne and I were on that, and we saw someone have a walk-in or walk-on where a spirit kind of took over the body, and this was where it happened. The Star of India, when you get on it, it really is being transported to another time. It's a tough ghost hunt because, first of all, when you get to the bottom of the ship, which is where it really kind of gets interesting, there's this noise like this all the time, like hundreds of things like this. And those are, I believe, we don't know if they're popcorn shrimp or crayfish, or if they're mating, or they're the, something attaches to the ship and it makes that noise constantly. Plus, like that noise you hear in movies where the ship is making that creaking, that is also constant. That is the mast, moving, and those are the ropes and things moving back and forth. So it's always a very, very noisy place to be. So, and I am a picture girl anyways. I take pictures. So it is a tough ghost hunt. But man, it's when you get on this, the first thing that you're kind of fascinated is, if you've been on ships, it's not that big. It's big, but it's not that big. I know that's a horrible description, but if you've been on a cruise ship or any kind of ship at all, this is really small compared to that. And when you hear I always think about them going overseas. I've been on the big cruise ships, and those get rocky. You can't imagine this going overseas in whatever it was. And I have the date here somewhere about the Star of India, or maybe I don't. Those are the two options. I have it or I don't. 1865, I think. 1865. I'll check that. Or you can double check it. Google it right now and correct me. And see, I'm nodding, saying you're correct. All these notes in front of me, that's the one thing I forgot. But it is fascinating at how seasick they must have gotten on this. It is just not that big. And it's got two major hauntings on it, okay? And the one is, these are the stories about it. One of the captains actually died on it. They always said there were only 2 members of the crew that knew how to navigate, and it was specifically made like that so there wouldn't be a mutiny. Okay, so you can't take over the 2 guys. You got the captain and the other guy. You have to have those guys to steer the ship. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. And also, they said sometimes they would get into port and the crew would get together and they would decide, are we going to trade or are we going to be pirates? Are we going to tell anybody or are we going to take this stuff? So the sea always, it doesn't have the best reputation. You can see why. But when you get on this, it really is like being in that time. I can't even explain it. But if you get a chance, you want to go on the tour because it really is like stepping through time. I have been in clear air turbulence on airplanes twice. Okay. The first time was in a flight back home from Japan where that's where the plane drops like 500 feet. Like the plane just fell and everybody's food tray went in the air. And I remember the guy next to me grabbed my arm and was screaming, "We're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die." And then it just stops and it goes back to normal. And he went right back to eating his meal, I guess, hoping I wouldn't mention the fact that he just screamed, "We're going to die." And actually a flight attendant broke their arm on that flight because it was so bumpy. And I remember the captain came on after and he was like, "Oh, you guys, you get all riled about nothing. Ha ha ha, that happens all the time." And I remember thinking, what a jerk. That's a horrible thing to do to us. And then years later, I was on a flight to Greenland. And it was a very small, I think it was the Air Force. It was a small plane. We were out there to do a show for the military. And it was just this horrific up and down crazy plane ride. And I just was like trying to sleep through it. And I remember when we landed and we got off, the pilot was white as a sheet. And somebody said to him, "You guys go through that all the time, don't you?" The other comic said that because I think there was 5 of us on this plane. And the pilot said, "Oh my God, we thought we were all going to die." And I thought, as a big car goes by in my thing, and I thought I would rather have the arrogant pilot, the guy that laughed, because that's not, when you see your pilot and his face is white as a sheet, that is bad. Now, that being said, I've worked on many cruise ships, small and large, and I cannot imagine this ship out on the open seas. It must have just been crazy. That being said, I also think this is, during the zombie apocalypse, this is where I'm going. I think no one is going to think, let's get on an old ship and just go out a little bit. The ship still runs. They take it out twice a year, so it's still a working ship. So that's very, very interesting. For the zombie apocalypse, I think it's going to be perfect. That's where you'll see me. People can't get on and off. You got to have the little dinghy or whatever that is that brings you back and forth. Another ship that I had been on was, I'm going to talk about that later. Okay. So, the Star of India is the oldest active ship. So that's also something interesting. They have haunted, trips where kids, I don't know why kids are the only ones, they get to ride on it and they sleep in the mid-level, which is oddly enough they call that the tween level of the ship. But this ship has two very active ghosts. One is of a young boy. He stowed away on the ship. He was a stowaway. And, here's all my information on that. I jumped around on this. The original name of this ship was 1863. I'm sorry, that's when it was built. And the original name was the Euterpe, something like that. Some of you will correct me. It was the Greek muse of poetry and music. That was the name. And in 1901, the Alaska Packers Company, yes, they bought it. And the thing about the ship, it was originally iron. It was one of the first iron ships, and it was made very big. That was a way that they thought to keep it safe. And actually, iron keeps away gin and fairies. So they were getting rid of gin and fairies at the same time. But it really did not sail as well. So when they took it over, they replaced that. They fixed the iron on the ship and everything like that. The first two trips after this company bought it were horrible. The first one had a collision and a mutiny. Okay, so that's got to be great when you hit something and then your own people throw you over. And the second one, it hit a cyclone and the mast broke and they almost didn't get the ship to shore. So that wasn't a good idea. I think once you've had a collision and a mutiny, maybe you retire the ship after that trip. And then it made 4 more trips to India after 1871. It was purchased by a company in London. Okay, so for half a century, it actually worked, did very well. It was hauling immigrants from New Zealand, Australia, California, Chile, and it stayed. And that's where they all stayed on the tween deck. They had, this is very interesting side note. They had a diet of hardtack, hardtack, and that is a biscuit. Just made of flour and water. Sometimes they had salt on it, but it looks awful. I actually went and put together a videotape of that. I watched the videotape on YouTube of how they make it. It looks awful. It comes out hard as a rock. It lasts up to 20 years. So that was all they would have on the ship for the longest time. And apparently it inspired Twinkies. Maybe this stuff could last longer than Twinkies. And that was all they had to eat on the ship. Ugh. The ship also once became trapped in ice in Alaska, just like on that show, The Terror. And so they had a stowaway. And it was this little kid. Let me see when I got my notes on that. This little kid was a stowaway. His name was Oswald Lotz. And I think they said he was like 10 years old. And he was with 2 friends. They found him as soon as the ship got out to sea. I can't imagine how dull your life is that you want to stow away on a ship. I really can't. Even as a little boy. And although I haven't been a little boy in this life, I'm sure in the last life I was much smarter than that. So the captain made them work for their food, but most of the time the kids were out playing. They were playing on the deck, and they used to play tag, but it was almost a different type of tag where you didn't tag someone. You would sneak up behind them, and with your finger you'd draw an S on them. So that's what they did most of the day. So one day this kid sounds like he just had bad parenting from the start. Stowing away, not telling his parents, and then he started to be a show-off, and he climbed to the top of the mast, and he fell 100 feet. If you've been on the Star of India, the ship literally has, like in the middle, it's got a railing on it, but you can go he fell right through from the top deck onto the second deck, and that's where he died. That was on That was on June 29th in 1884. And that's what it said on the log. And to this day, people will still be walking around the ship and feel someone draw a little S on their back, and then it's gone. So that was the first one. The other one was there was a first mate's cabin. There was a drunken passenger that cut his own throat. Already sounds like a fun guy to be drinking with. Drunken passenger cut his own throat. The medic or the first mate, they sewed him up and they moved him into the first mate's cabin. And there they tried to save his life, and they left him for a minute, and he pulled out his stitches, and he died there. That first mate's cabin is very, very haunted. People that stay in that seem to feel someone pulling on their covers as though trying to get into bed or trying to do that. But I will say, I really believe on this Star of India, there's something else on there that doesn't seem to be covered by legends or anything like that. I just, that walk-in left a bad taste in my mouth. And so we had the investigation, and it was really fun. They're always fun, and that is such a fun group that I go with. Wayne Poe, that's been on the show, and a couple of the people I always go out investigating with. And a lot of them did get EVPs or stuff like that. Something, I don't know. They're better people than me. I can't listen to tapes all that long, and my hearing's not that good. I went through over 400 pictures and only found a couple of things that I will say I found suspicious. I didn't find as exactly evidence. But the way the investigation ended was when you're on this ship, it is important. There's one way to get on. There's like a just a path, one path. I don't know. I'm sure it's got some fancy ship name, like I don't know. It's a path to me. And they close it. So when you're on the ship, you're on the ship alone. It's all yours. And they have a security guard that comes by. He lets you on. He shows you how to turn on and off lights and stuff like that. But no one else is supposed to be on the ship. And most of the time, in many investigations, when you're in something like this or in an abandoned building, the scariest thing is another human. And exactly what happened, we were down on the 'tween deck. In fact, we were exactly where that kid fell. And we heard screaming upstairs. Someone is screaming, and we couldn't tell what it was. And we shut it. We go, this is a real person. And we all run upstairs, and it's a crazy lady. She has not even, she could have opened the gate. She didn't open the gate. She hopped over the gate and was on the ship screaming, the water is rising. Can't you see that the water is rising? And we were all like, the water's not rising, and you need to get off the ship. And we had a little trouble getting her off, but she kept screaming that the water was rising. And then again, she went down the walk, hopped over the gate that she could have opened, and went off. And I don't really think that's anything paranormal. It sort of put a big end to the night because it was such an intense moment when you're running into someone that's not supposed to be there. But I always kind of find it interesting that why would she yell that? You know, maybe she was taken over by somebody that thought the ship was sinking, but it was not. Another haunted ship. So I'm getting into other haunted ships now. I started reading all this stuff and I became fascinated. Another ship is the Queen Mary, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. And the reason why is the Queen Mary is a place where they have it is great ghost hunting. You can go down in the engine room, you can go in the pool room, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but they are very it's very much a business now. There are places where they have weddings, they have restaurants, they have bars, and it's not really how do I put it? Not raw is not the word. It doesn't flow there's always other people around. So it's kind of, the best time I went ghost hunting there was when we really were alone at the pool. And the pool, you can look this up anywhere and see all kinds of tape, is famously haunted by a little girl named Jackie. And I've had I know people that do books on Jackie. There's all kinds of books on the little ghost of Jackie. There's all kinds of EVPs of the voice of a little girl. I know someone that went there that was a medium that she swears that's not a little girl, that's something more nefarious. She said it looked like a pterodactyl. So there, you can challenge your amount of believability or gullibility there, whether it was a giant pterodactyl acting like a little girl or a little girl. But I will say this. There is the greatest tape on YouTube. My friend Brandon Alvis got it, and he's going to be a guest on this podcast. He's with American Paranormal Research Society, and they are fantastic. And if you go to YouTube, the tape is called Ghost Video RMS Queen Mary Apparition APRA Paranormal. So APRA Paranormal, all you have to know is look up American Paranormal Research Society. It is a short tape, and I believe it was Brandon. I'm going to have him tell us about it when it's on. But I think it was his girlfriend, or it was him, left the camera on, and it actually was swinging, and they got the most, I think probably the best piece of video evidence I've ever seen. And knowing them, it's not faked. And when you see how it happens, you know it's not faked. And it is a little girl peeking her head out of a corner. And one of the things that's very interesting, it is in the green eye or night vision camera. There is no reflection in her eyes. You know, with those cameras where you get that reflection and everybody looks creepy. No reflection in the eyes, which really is kind of a good piece of evidence that it was not a human being. So that on the Queen Mary. You can go on the Queen Mary. It's pretty expensive. It's a fun place to go. But my favorite would be the Star of India because you really get that feeling of being there. So I went on, and the first thing I started to look into was cursed ships. And man, is this a cursed ship. This ship was called the Great Eastern. It was built in 1857. It was the biggest ship of its time. The ship's owner, I would say designer, they called him the Little Giant of England. His name was Isambard Brunel. Isambard Brunel. Very hard to figure out how to say that. So I think most of you are like, we get it, Karen. You give us half the information and we'll put the story together. He had this ship built, and it started problems the day it launched. Okay. I believe it was built in England. Yes. Okay. So the day it was launched, one of the mooring cables snapped and killed 2 workers. Okay. That's how we're starting. After the first launch of the ship, or the first day of the ship, they had riveters working on the double hull. And they were putting it together, and the 2 of them, this ship had, the 2 of them, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here. 2 of the riveters that were putting together, it was like a double hull. There was iron, they were putting the iron on both sides. They figured this would protect the ship. They accidentally riveted themselves into the bottom of the ship. In other words, they were having like 2 panels here, and these 2 riveters just disappeared, and it was thought that they had riveted themselves into the bottom of the ship. Okay, they couldn't find them anywhere, and then after that, they were forgotten, which is nice, isn't it? They thought that actually those 2 iron things would make it safer. Apparently not if you're a riveter. And that is another thing. That is poor planning on the riveter's part, not to make sure they can get out. So on the first trip that it actually took after all of this, a boiler exploded. 3 died, and then 1 guy jumped off the ship to try not to be in the explosion, and he got crushed in the paddle. Okay. When they got to the destination, the captain and 5 others took the dinghy to shore. The dinghy overturned and 5 of them drowned. Okay. Now remember, we're talking about a cursed ship here. The ship, so many rumors were given about how bad luck this ship was. The ship that held 4,000 actually made a trip, only 35 passengers on it. Only 35 people would pay to get on this. And those 35 people had more stories. The stories always start with someone tapping, moaning. It is actually really sounds like it's the 2 riveters. They're tapping and screaming. People could hear this all throughout the ship, tapping, screaming, trying to get out. When it made its first landing in New York, the paddle wheel on the ship just destroyed about 5 feet of the dock. It just came in like a roaring and destroyed the dock. Then 5 then two inspectors came on to look and see what happened. They both fell overboard and died. Okay, and we're not even done in New York. Later that same trip, two drunken sailors went to get on the ship and they fell off, and those two died. And in this same year, Isambard Brunel, remember the little giant, the name I struggled with? He had 2 strokes and died, okay? I'm not done yet with the Great Eastern. The Great Eastern is a great killer. The passengers that rode said the haunting experiences were constant and just unbelievable. In 1860, again, outside New York, a rock gashed the outer hull, so a crew of riveters were brought in and they refused to work on it after hearing the tapping. They went in to fix the ship and they heard so much tapping and so many noises that scared them. Oh, there's my dog snoring. That they actually would not fix the ship. So in 1866, Sirius Beale, they bought the ship. Okay, that was a guy, Sirius Beale. He bought the ship and actually had a good trip. And what it did, it had 3,000 miles of coiled steel in it, in the hull, and it laid the first transatlantic cable. So they actually had 5 good trips in there. They kind of thought the bad luck, the curse was over. But then after those trips, Beale sold it, which good for him. That was very smart. The French government bought it and tried to turn it into a luxury liner, but it only sailed once. Okay, and then it was just a travesty. They said they just lost so much money on it. It was crazy. And in 1889, an English company bought it for scrap. And as they were taking it apart, it had been 31 years, 33 deaths on the ship. As they were taking it apart, it wasn't over. The guys that were on the ship supposed to be taking apart, which is a big job, taking apart this giant ship, they got in a fight. Another guy died there. And then as they tore apart the hull, the riveters found the skeleton of the guy that was said to be stuck in there. So I think he was actually haunting that ship, but that's a pretty horrible death. So that's the Great Eastern. How's that for a cursed ship? I think I would have avoided that one too. And it's funny, this next story, this next ship, actually I have a story. I was working on a ship in Corpus Christi. It was a very small gambling ship, and I was working there as a comedian, and you would fly and stay in a horrible hotel in Corpus Christi. You get on it every day about 3, and you would, I think we would get back at like 2 in the morning, and it was just a ship that would, it was a ship that would take people out far enough that gambling was free in international waters, and then bring them back. And I remember one of the interesting, a side note, everybody knows I have a side note and a different story on it. I would always hang out with the ship captain's son, and I think I was in my 30s then. And he was I think he was somewhere between 15 and 18, I don't know. And I have to say, the English probably are better than us. They probably are. I know that's the stereotype, but he was an English captain. This kid was English. He was so smart because education is so important to them there. And he had been in this ship traveling all over the world all his life. Not this particular ship, but his captain is going with his father all over the world. And he was so interesting. So we used to hang out in my little cabin and just talk all the time. And this is why I don't have a real job. In comedy, when you do something wrong, they come over and tell you it's dealt with. You go home on Sunday. If they don't like you or you don't like them, they work again. But that's how it's dealt with. Every time I have been in any other kind of a job, it's always somebody else whispering about someone else's business that goes through so-and-so, and then they say to so-and-so. Elko, Nevada, the same thing. The sound people decided they were going to cause trouble for me. They went all through the casino. I get a phone call from somebody else. This is why I can't work in a regular job. So somebody that was working on this ship that was an American, I don't know if she was a cruise director or something like that, she went to the captain and she said, don't you think it's a problem that your son is spending so much time with that girl in her cabin? And the captain, in his wisdom, said, well, first of all, she's a woman. which I thought was great. That was the first time I had ever been called a woman, and I was like, yeah, that's what I am. I'm a woman. And then he said, I'm not worried about my son, and is that any business of yours? And I was like, yeah. So that's why I was on this ship with them. And while we were out to sea, we got a phone call and we had to divert because a small shrimp boat had been run over by an oil tanker. And the guys on the shrimp boat were out in the life rafts. And that was one of the most fascinating things I had ever seen. Now, you don't ever disrupt a cruise ship. In fact, they talked about a guy that had a heart attack, and they actually had a helicopter lift him off and bring him to shore, which that's got to, when you're having a heart attack, there's nothing more you want to do than be lifted by a helicopter. That probably helps out a lot. But they were not going to stop gambling. They were like, you can have your heart attack in the helicopter. We're going to continue to make money gambling. And this ship made a turn. I know because the son came and got me. He was like, you got to see this. These guys came out from the bottom of the boat. I had been on this ship for months, and I do not even remember these. You talk about organized. These guys came up. They got in rowboats with blankets, and it was like the most. They must have practiced 100 times. It was flawless the way they went out and got these guys from the shrimp boat and got them back into safety. They covered them up in blankets, and they were then everybody disappeared to the bottom of the ship. And it was almost like an emotional thing when you're watching people be rescued like that. It was amazing. And I remember standing out on the front of that ship. At night, I would go there because you'd just be in the fog. You'd just be moving in the fog, and you couldn't see anything but fog coming at you. And I always thought that was the most mysterious and scary feeling ever. Just like you would picture something's going to pop out of the fog. This is where the monster comes from. And it was just a very, very interesting experience out on the ship. And I've been on the big cruise ships, like I said, but the reason I tell you this is because we get to the next part, which is ghost ships, okay? And this is where ships have been overrun or where they're saving other ships, so that's why I threw that little story in. But the story I have now that I looked up, I did not know. It is called the Flying Dutchman, okay? And the Flying Dutchman is sort of this name for all ghost ships. They show up all over, and they have different things. So there's many versions of the story of how it started or the legends of it. The first is that it was a very mean Dutch captain that had a ship of pirates, and they were just greedy, and they were just wicked, and they died on their ship, and it's this horrible ghost ship. That was one of them. There was another theory that this Dutchman was actually a captain that was very nice, a good guy. He went home one day and thought his wife and his brother were having an affair, and then he killed them and then found out it wasn't true. So he was sort of destined to forever sail the seas. Kind of that would be his karmic duty, that he was sent out to sail the seas. But another one was that he sold his soul for the fastest ship on the ocean. But either way, the Flying Dutchman is a ship that is seen often, and even to this day, people still see it. Now, when we talk about a ghost ship, there's a couple of scientific reasons why people see it. One could just be hallucinations. When you're out on the sea that long, just staring at the sea, they might have hallucinated this. The other is it can actually be a mirage or an image that is bounced off clouds onto the ocean, which that's pretty interesting. That it could be a ship somewhere else actually reflected, or even their own ship reflected on the clouds, and just the image comes up on the water. And I found that very interesting. But when you see a Flying Dutchman, that's a bad omen. Not like a Dutch oven, just a Flying Dutchman, but that's a bad omen also. So there are many tales of the Flying Dutchman. There was a ship that was once nearly run over by the Flying Dutchman, and then it would ultimately pass. A lot of action in the Bermuda Triangle. Still people seeing a ship full of skeletons. Now that was added to the story in a different, nowadays, I think that this story was from the 1990s. It was about a family that really saw mother, father, daughter, or they claimed in the Bermuda Triangle, they saw a ship full of skeletons. Yeah, I don't know. Pirates of the Caribbean. Maybe they've seen too many movies. But the legend says the Dutchman can be freed if he finds the love of a good woman. How about that? Maybe you lose the skeletons if you want to find the love of a good woman. Good women don't like men with a bunch of skeleton friends. Think of the wedding. Just the clicking of the bones. The tuxedos that never fit right. No. So the legend with that is that true love conquers all, even when you're cursed at sea. But yeah, I'm not going with that. So as I started to look more, I found out there are a bunch of ships, and they call them ghost ships, not in that they're ships full of ghosts, but ships that just have odd coincidences. There's one called the SS Bachimo. It was a northern Canada ship. It used to trade pelts, and on October 1st, 1931, it got stuck in the ice. Okay, they got it out on October 8th, 7 days later, it got stuck again. At that point, half the crew left. They just left and took off to go wherever they could. And the rest built a shelter right off of the side of the ship so that they could stay in that and spend the night there. Well, a blizzard hit, and none of them were ever seen again. But it turned up 45 miles away in 1969. Okay, so we're looking at 1931. It was also seen offshore in Alaska in 1969. And there have been several sightings of this ship, and people say that they have even got on it. So that's sort of a ghost ship in the way that nobody's on it. But it's interesting how it got lost from 1931 to 1969. Alaska actually, in that point in 1969, they started a fund in a community where they really went to look for it. They really wanted to see if they could find this ship from a historic point of view, but it was never found. The other one is the Sabrina. That was a 3-mast sailing barge. In October 1970, it left Falmouth, England, and it was found 2 days later in France, empty. Everything's still on it, food's still on it, not like pirates had been on it. They thought maybe German submarines had, a German submarine had come on and sort of kidnapped the crew without taking anything, and then the submarine sank. So that sounds like an awful lot of coincidence there. This makes me think of that flight, that just disappeared. It was the Malaysian flight. That'll be my next one. I'm going to do research on that and see what we found, because I believe they thought they found pieces of, they didn't. But this is just going in to see something disappearing and never being seen again. So here's one called the Jenny. This one was an English schooner. In 1843, it got frozen in the ice passage at Drake. It was at a place called Drake Passage. And in 1860, it was found by a whaling ship. So 1843 to 1860, 23 years there. Check this out. The bodies of 6 of the sailors, since it was in the ice in Drake's Passage, which is up, I believe that's in the article. That's what they're talking about in the ship, the Terror. 6 dead crew members, bodies perfectly preserved from being frozen. And the captain's body, captain sitting at his desk, frozen with pen in hand, and the last log he was making on the logbook said, "No food for 71 days. I am the only one alive." Okay, that's creepy. All right, 23 years later. Wow. So now here's one that's kind of closer. It's called Kaz 2, Kaz 2. This is a ghost yacht. This is This is a 32-foot catamaran that was off the Australian coast in 2007. They went out, they took off from there. 3 days later, a helicopter spotted them because they were going towards the reef. And they sent somebody out, the Coast Guard or somebody out to find the ship. No men on the ship, no foul play, nothing missing. They think, this is their theory, there were 3 men on it. One fell overboard, and then 2 of them jumped over to help. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my life. No life jackets in there. You know what? One person stay on the boat if you have to jump off. One person stay on the boat. That's going to be, I should get t-shirts with the on that. Life lesson number 1. One person always remain on the boat. So I guess the yacht just took off and left those guys there. That had to be an awkward conversation right there. Another one. Here's another one. The SSS Valencia taking off from San Francisco to Seattle in 1906. 62 crew members, 108 people on it. They hit bad weather. They hit a reef in Vancouver, and they thought they had to abandon the ship, but they actually didn't. 136 people died. Now, in 1933, this is 27 years later, a lifeboat from the SS Valencia was found floating near the site of the wreck. So that's incredible. So it would be 27 years later, one of the lifeboats still floating in that same area, or floated away and came back. I don't know. So these are some pretty good stories here, man. And here's a little ship trivia, and I got the superstitions of ships. There were people that were actually called wreckers. I never heard of this. These are almost like pirates that were on land. And they would, most of the time they had people that would wait, the ships that would crash or sink near the reef, they would wait and just collect. Something would wash up on shore and people would take that. And there's probably no bad mojo on those, huh? But wreckers were actually people that would signal the ships to come in. They would make lights or something that would try and make the ship crash. They would then kill the people on board and take from the ship. So they were actually like, the opposite of pirates, the anti-pirate, the land pirate. And the false lights, they said there was always a legend that the crew would come back and kill the wreckers. But I had never heard that term before. Okay, so now I looked up superstitions of ships, okay, because I found that interesting. First of all, first superstition, I did not know, no bananas. Bananas are thought to be bad luck on ships, and they think that's because in the Caribbean in the 1700s, most of the ships that carried the bananas disappeared. Nobody knows what happened there. They think there's 2 theories on that. The first would be that bananas spoil too fast, which, yes, I can't get my bananas home from Trader Joe's down the street before they go from yellow to brown. Bananas do go bad fast, not good for a long trip. And the second was that they had deadly spiders on them, that people got bit by the spiders from the bananas and died. But I would think if you were from the Caribbean, you would know what kind of spiders were on bananas. Okay, number 2 superstition, no women. Okay, women were thought to be bad luck, distracted the sailors. Again, as females, it's our fault. I don't know how that happened. You guys can't control your pants or something. It's our fault. And we were thought to anger the seas. But there's one exception. Naked women were welcome. Okay, so women with clothes on, bad luck. Naked women were thought to calm the sea. That's why the bow of a ship, often you'd see a sculpture of a woman that was topless, because her breasts would calm the sea. Think of the metaphors there. They would put that on the bow of the ship because it was to shame the sea into not having a... Sure, I know a lot of guys have porn on their computers, and when they get caught, they say, well, they were just shaming the sea. 3, a male child that was born on a ship was supposed to be called a son of a gun. I'm not sure, that's the most I could find out on that. Well, that he was thought to be good luck. Again, women bad luck unless they're naked. little son born on ship. He's a son of a gun. No whistling on board. Whistling is thought to stir up a storm. And that is like the Hawaiian, you never whistle by the ocean in Hawaii. That's a Hawaiian thing. Because you will, now watch me hack this name. Hukiapu, and his ghost of ancient Hawaiian warriors will start to march, and you never let them make eye contact with you. I've heard that a lot in Hawaii. You never whistle by the water. Another one, very simple one, red skies at night, sailor's delight. Red skies during the day makes sailors mad. I can't remember the second half of that, but we all know that one. Number 6, words on a ship you never use. You never use goodbye or drowned or good luck. It's even like a theater. You're not supposed to wish anybody good luck. And if you say those words, the only way to diffuse the curse or what it is to draw blood. So you have to get in a fight with the person that said that. Number 7, sharks following a ship. That's bad luck. I think sharks following anything is bad luck. I think sharks are bad luck. I hate sharks. But if you got a shark following your ship, throw your bananas at them. Dolphins are good, though. You see a bunch of dolphins following the ship, they're good. Now, there are days you're not supposed to sail. Fridays you're not supposed to sail because that's the day that Jesus was crucified. And I guess that's the day he didn't go in his yacht. Jesus didn't cruise his yacht on Fridays because he's crucified. Thursdays are Thor Day, which is Thor was thought to make storms. April 1st is the day that Cain slew Abel. I didn't know any of this. So apparently April 1st, April Fool's Day, Cain and Abel got into a beef. Not supposed to sail on those days. Maybe you can fly. I think I've flown on April Fool's. Second Monday in August, because that was the day the kingdom of Sodom and Gomorrah fell. Number 10, pierced earrings. A gold earring meant you had already made one journey around the world or at least past the equator. Gold was thought to be good luck, and tattoos were thought to be good luck. If you, what was bad luck, you're not supposed to cut your hair, your nails, or your beard. I would say after weeks on ships with long nails, hair, and beards, those guys smelled great. At least they had their gold earring. Okay, number 11, don't change the name of the ship. I think we already saw how that went with the Star of India and the Great Eastern, but the Great Eastern kept its name, so we got to debunk that one. Number 12, no gingers, no redheads. Redheads were thought to be bad luck on the ship. Why are people so against redheads? I do not know. And the last one, do not kill a bird or an albatross. Birds were always thought to carry the spirits of dead soldiers or dead sailors. I know hummingbirds are thought to carry the spirits of dead relatives. So when you see a hummingbird around you, that is supposed to be someone coming to visit you. So everyone, that is my my solo podcast about ships and ghost ships. How'd you like it? That was kind of interesting. I hope you didn't mind me stumbling all over. So that was my weekly obsession. I sat through hours of reading and watching things and brought that to you. So I hope you liked it. Please send any comments to paranormalkaren@gmail.com. And you can go to my website or see my web series, Paranormal Karen, on YouTube. You can go to my website, which is karenrontowski.com. You can book a tarot reading, or you can check out, I have a new sponsorship page. If you want to throw me some money, that would be appreciated, since Courage is at the vet every other day. You can make a donation to Courage. But please send me your comments. If you have a ghost story or a conspiracy theory, please send that to me so I can do an episode with my sister. And I think I have covered. Oh, and if you can leave me a review, a 5-star review or something like that on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you listen, that would be great. So thanks, everybody. I'll be back next week with a guest. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. People
People always ask me where I get my crystals and beautiful gemstone jewelry, and I tell them I go right to GaiaSpirits.com. Gaia Spirits Gift Shop has everything from crystals to singing bowls, and they also offer readings, Reiki, gift certificates, and home blessing services that fit everyone's budget. My friend Robin Celine has years of experience with crystals, so if you're not sure what you're looking for, she is always right there to help. They even have crystal packages to help with house cleansings and getting rid of some of those pesky ghosts. I get so many compliments on my black tourmaline necklace Robin suggested for grounding, and so far I haven't floated away yet. As a special gift for my listeners, use coupon code ParanormalKaren and receive 10% off your first purchase. Again, use coupon code ParanormalKaren, all one word. GaiaSpirits.com, where I go for all my crystal and gemstone needs.